Welcome into the SEC Football Hour. It is episode number 9. I'm Chase Robinson. That's Chris Lee. We get to spend the next hour or so talking SEC football with you as we're going to dive into several topics today. Really excited to have a conversation with the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers, Bob Kesling, in a little bit. Also, we're going to rank top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC. Looking forward to doing that. We've been doing some rankings in different positions, and we're going to do quarterbacks today. We'll see what you think about our list. Of course, we'll have likely and unlikely. And Chris, we sit here. We're in the month of August now. Football season. I mean, fall camp is going on for every team. I mean, it's here, Chris. Ready or not, football season is upon us.
Chase, we're 3.5 weeks from football. Can't believe it. It's going to fly by. We're reaching that saturation point where we've hit the same off-field topics over and over, ready for some football. And thank God it's going to be a really good week one. Sometimes week one's kind of a dog, but we've got a good one ahead this year.
We really do. And we're going to do our best to get you ready for football season here on Southeastern 16. Before we go any farther, let's talk about Bet Online. They are the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, you can go to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or one of the over 150 slots games. You can head over to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. That is promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV. Bet Online, the game starts here. So where we're going to start today, Chris, is we started this last week with some breakout players. I've got 4 teams. This week it's Alabama, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, and Ole Miss. And we're going to have a breakout player for each of those teams. So we'll start with Alabama, Chris. Who do you think needs to have a breakout season for the Tide in 2024?
Just have a feeling we're going to pick the same guy. It's based on nothing but gut feeling. But I went Justice Haynes, the running back for the Crimson Tide, who, of course, came in with a lot of accolades, has gotten some preseason love as a potential All-SEC guy. Just a very talented kid, comes from a great pedigree. His father played for Georgia. And look, that next great running back at Alabama, it could be this guy. Who knows?
You know, I actually thought about him. I think that's a really good pick. I think he does need to have a breakout year. I went defense, though, for
Okay.
Alabama, just because there's not a lot of experience coming back on defense. They've changed things up a lot. Kane Womack, now the defensive coordinator, he's bringing in kind of a new system. So I feel like there needs to be that one guy that needs to kind of be the anchor of the defense, and that's Malachi Moore this year. I feel like for Alabama. He's the safety there. Fantastic player. He had a great year last year, but I think this year is when he really needs to step out and be kind of the leader on this defense, because I feel like they've got talent. There's no doubt about it, but they don't have that guy. You know, in years past, last year was Dallas Turner. You had Will Anderson. You've got kind of these main guys on defense. And I feel like he's got to be that for Alabama this year. So I went defense, and I went Malachi Moore on a defense where they've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah, I think we've approached it differently. When I think breakout player, I think of a guy who's been maybe a marginal player or a good player, taking the game up a level or two. And that's kind of
Right.
how I went about it. But if you approach it like that, I guess I already consider Malachi Moore having broken out. But by way of what you're saying, because I think that defense is, from what I've heard, trickling out of camp, the defense is more of a concern than the offense at this point. And in the back end, where they're going to have to play some freshman corners a lot of time, I think it would seem like you would really need some safety help. So I think by the way you have come together with it, it's hard to argue what you've done there.
Yeah, and I understand, like, he has broken out, but like he needs to do that this season, I think is the important thing. So that is our breakout players for Alabama. The Oklahoma Sooners, who would you say needs to have a breakout season, breakout player for Oklahoma?
Well, this is one that works for both the way you approach it and the way I approach it. That's Jackson Arnold, the quarterback who's super skilled, is going to be a guy who's stepped up from a reserve role to the full time guy now. Very talented 5-star recruit out of high school, and going to be the guy that makes that offense go or not go. And I think in this case, go. So I think to me, that was an easy one. I had a second choice that I'll see if you maybe went with this guy or not. I don't think you did, but I'll tell you my second choice after hearing your guy here.
Yeah, so I went with Gavin Sawchuk,
Okay.
and again, he's a guy that he broke out per se last season. He had 5 straight 100-yard games, but they need that consistently, and they need to establish the run game. I feel like early in the season, while Jackson Arnold is getting in there, getting comfortable with the offense, getting comfortable playing an SEC schedule. They need something to rely on offense, and I think that's going to be the run game. So I think, yes, while Gavin Sawchuk again has broken out per se, like he needs to have a huge year this year, especially to start the season. I feel like to establish the run game.
Yeah, my second guy, I went defense. David Stone, the 5-star top 10 recruit that is very well liked up there. Seems like it would be my second pick if you went on the defensive side, because I think
Yeah.
that's a place where Oklahoma. I think that we have relative questions. Oklahoma. I'm not saying their defensive line is bad at all, but I'm saying like you look everywhere else on the field other than the quarterback, which is an unknown. We think we know how it's going to go. Stone's a kid. I think the defensive line, compared to their back seven, is maybe relatively not as strong. And Stone's a guy that I could see stepping up and doing some big things.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly can. And so yeah, that's a good second choice as well. All right, Vanderbilt Commodores. Who would you say is a breakout player for Vandy this year?
All right, I'm going to give you a name that you're not going to get anywhere else. And this guy is I think, going to be a breakout guy in every sense of the word, because I don't think he's played a snap. But you look at that roster, Chase, there's not a lot of guys on that roster that you look at and say, I think this guy could maybe play for Alabama or Georgia or somebody like that. But they've got a tight end named Cole Spence, who's been hurt the whole time he's been on campus. But the guy's about 6'7", runs really well, catches the ball well. I think Cole Spence in an offense that's going to lean a lot on tight end usage is going to be a big player for them this year. And a guy that I'll give you a little tip here. If you play SEC fantasy football, I'm not saying pick this guy up on your roster right away, but you might keep an eye on that guy. If you need some tight end help later in the year, I think Cole Spence is a guy that's going to be able to help you if he is as good as I think he is going to be.
Okay, that's some good insight there. For Vandy, I went very basic here, I guess. In quarterback Diego Pavia.
Yeah.
Um, they've got to do something offensively, and obviously it starts with him. Like to win games, you've got to score, and they've got to do a lot of that this year, I feel like. And so I think kind of this whole team starts with what they're going to do offensively, and then that starts with quarterback Diego Pavia. So if they want to win some SEC games and get this thing going where they want it to go, then they're going to have good quarterback play to me.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. You would think it's he that will get the job over Nate Johnson. They brought in the entire New Mexico State offensive staff. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it, which you would think pretends that Diego Pavia will beat Nate Johnson out for the job. Look, Chase, that's not a very gifted offense. They're going to have to run the ball a lot, probably run the ball from the quarterback position and shorten the game and not make mistakes. And I think how Diego Pavia does or doesn't perform in those regards, I think you're right. I think he's the key player on the team.
So that's Vandy. Now, breakout players for Ole Miss. Who would you say is should be a breakout player for the Rebels this year?
Well, and again, by the way I approached it, you look at this team, it is so old. Not just the guys it returns, but the guys it brought in. And Ole Miss has got good players pretty much every position on the field. There's a kid named Suntaran Perkins that I think they really like, that played as a true freshman. And he played well last year, but he probably doesn't get the attention that the other guys do. So I think that was sort of my pick by default. Now, I don't think he makes or breaks their season, but looking out, they've just got guys everywhere who've been starters for 2 or 3 years, and he's one of the few that hasn't. So I think he's the guy that steps up and probably does bigger things than he did a year ago.
Yeah, and he's one because I was looking through all these defensive guys for Ole Miss, and I went on the defense route as well. And he was one of those I thought about, but I went with the transfer from Alabama, Trey Amos.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
steps
good one.
into this Ole Miss defense, and I feel like this is the perfect situation and scenario for Trey Amos going to Ole Miss, playing now with Pete Golden, a guy who he's familiar with. I just feel like I'm good with Ole Miss on offense. I think they're gonna. I mean, they've got the players to have a spectacular year. The defense is where they're gonna have to stop other teams, which they've had problems doing in the last couple of years. And so I think Trey Amos could be definitely a piece that can help do that there in the back of the defense for Ole Miss. So I like Trey Amos. I think he's in a kind of the perfect scenario now being at Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think I like your pick better than mine there because I think Ole Miss has got so many guys on the front seven that played a lot of ball at a high level. I'm not saying they don't have that in the secondary, but they got two new corners in he and Isaiah Hamilton from Houston. Look, if you got a weak spot at corner with the quarterbacks in this league, teams are going to pick on you in a hurry. Amos is a perfect example of a guy that's going to have to step up from being a role player at Alabama to a dude at Ole Miss, and I love that pick, Chase.
All right, so that is some breakout players for Alabama, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, and Ole Miss here on the SEC Football Hour here on our ninth episode. We'll shift gears to do some rankings here. Always enjoy ranking different positions, and we're gonna break out our top five quarterbacks in the SEC for 2024. And I'm interested to see how our lists compare as we go through them here. Top five quarterbacks. We'll start with five, work our way down to number one. Chris, who do you have at number five on your list of quarterbacks in the SEC?
Well, Chase, I got a confession. I took the cowardly way out with this pick because there's a lot of new quarterbacks in the league that I think could be really, really good. I mean, you've got Connor Wegman at A&M. You've got, oh gosh, the guy at Kentucky, Brock Vandegrift. You've got, I think you could see Garrett Nussmeier step up and have a huge year for LSU. Um, Jackson Arnold, Nico. I mean, we got a lot of good young quarterbacks, but here's the thing. None of them have really proven it yet.
Yep.
So is this guy going to be number 5 at the end of the year? I doubt it. But in trying to say, because to me, my top 4 were pretty easy.
Yeah.
But trying to pick, like, if I pick one of those young guys, I'm just going to make another fan base mad. If I take Jackson Arnold, then Tennessee's going to get mad, or vice versa. So, like I said, I took the chicken way out, and I went with the guy that threw 20 touchdowns and 3 picks a year ago, had an off-the-charts completion percentage. I went with the guy that's proven it so far, and with apologies to a certain quarterback in Missouri, I'm taking Graham Mertz of Florida as my number 5.
Okay. All right. I like it. I like what you did there, and I think that's respectable. I did go Brady Cook number 5.
Okay. Brady Cook would have been my next guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like he proved something last year. Now, will he continue that? I think is the question. But he had a great year last year. He was consistent last year. But I see what you're saying there with Graham Mertz. Like you look past, I think, all the hoopla of what happened last year, the record, the going into this year, and yeah, Graham Mertz, he's not a bad quarterback. You know, he had great numbers, and so yeah, I could see why you would put him at number 5. But yeah, I go Brady Cook 5, and I think he's a good quarterback. Will he be top 5 at the end of the year? We'll have to wait and see. Like you mentioned, there's a ton of good young quarterbacks that I feel like that this list could look much different even 2 months from now, when we get into September, when we start SEC play, like when these guys have a chance to prove themselves. But yeah, so you have Graham Mertz 5. I've got Brady Cook 5. Who is your number 4?
All right, I thought 2 to 4 were tough to separate, and I could have done
Yeah.
this in just about any order. And I mean, look, the most important stat is winning. And some guys in front of this guy have won some more, but I think you could even argue this guy at number 2. I took Jackson Dart of Ole Miss.
Yeah, I did as well. I've got Jackson Dart at number 4. Again, he's won good games, but I feel like, and it's the same like with Lane Kiffin, they haven't been able to win those big games. Like I
Yeah.
feel like if he's won more, he would have been way up. But I think kind of this year's Ole Miss season goes how Jackson Dart is this year. Like if he has a special standout year, then it's going to be a special year for Ole Miss. I think kind of the season hangs on what Jackson Dart does this year. I think he's a great quarterback. So yeah, this was hard because you get a lot of these guys who are kind
Yeah.
of similar there. But yeah, Jackson Dart. For who is your number 3?
And by the way, I think how many years could we have done this in the past and Jackson Dart would have been your 1? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that I think a lot of years he'd have been on the table. That says a lot about the quarterback play. Number 3, I took Jalen Milrow.
Okay.
And it was tough between he and my number 2. I think you could argue Milrow at 2, maybe even 1. 1 feels like a stretch, but just a dual threat guy who really got better as the season went on last year, and I think he's a very defensible top 3 pick.
I've also got Jalen Milrow at number 3.
Yeah,
I feel like, and here's where, because I originally, when I was marking this down, I did have him at number 2, but then I thought back to last year and just it did take him a while. Like if he had had the season he had in the last 6 games all season, then I
yeah,
think we would be talking about a much different Jalen Milrow. But he didn't. He struggled to start the year. He struggled against Texas. And it took him a little bit to kind of get in there and be comfortable and be okay with making mistakes. So that I think that's what kind of led him to number 3 is he didn't have that season he did towards the end of the year all year long.
yeah.
Again, if he had had that all year long, I would have definitely had him higher than 3. But hey, being the third best quarterback in the SEC is it's pretty good. So yeah, Jalen Milrow number 3. Who's your number 2?
Well, winning is the most important thing you can do as a quarterback, and to the victors go the spoils. This guy won the head-to-head battle between Jalen Milrow and himself last year in Tuscaloosa. That's Quinn Ewers of Texas.
Yes, I've also got Quinn Ewers at number 2. Um, Great quarterback to me. I love watching him play. And I think again this season, even with the pressure that he has with Arch Manning behind him, like he just seems so comfortable
Yeah.
in what he does, and he works so well with Sarks. So yeah, I like Quinn Ewers. Got him at number 2, and I bet I can bet who your number 1 is. Same as mine, Carson Beck
Yeah.
of Georgia.
Yeah, I think if either of us had a different number 1 at this point, we would have, we might have had it after the episode discussion privately, but that was a pretty easy one. So,
It was, and again, you win games behind a good quarterback, and Georgia wins games behind Carson Beck, and he is primed to have a really good season this year. Looking forward to watching him play. But yeah, so yeah, top 5 quarterback rankings. Only big difference was number 5. You had Graham Mertz, I had Brady Cook, and again, I feel like this is the year of the quarterbacks in the
yeah.
SEC, and we're gonna again. I'm interested, and maybe November, December, we can go back to this list and expand it and kind of rank quarterbacks based on the season because I think it could look much different with all these young quarterbacks that are out there.
Yeah, I think you could rank a top 10 after the season and leave a
Yeah,
good one out. I think that's how strong the league is this year.
yeah, for sure. So it's going to be fun offensive year uh, for for the SEC. And one of those young quarterbacks is from Tennessee. And we had a chance to talk a little Tennessee football with Bob Kesling, longtime voice of the Tennessee Volunteers. He took a few minutes with us earlier this week to chat to preview the Vols 2024 season. So let's listen into our conversation with the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers, Bob Kesling. And we're excited to have on the SEC Football Hour this week the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers, Bob Kesling. 26 years as the voice of the Vols. Bob, really appreciate you hopping on, talking some Tennessee football with us today.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Hey, Bob, I'll start. I've got a question that goes bigger than football.
Okay.
The last few years for Tennessee, I mean, if you compare it to where it was 5 years ago and compare it now across all sports, it is remarkable how much Tennessee has changed in the competitive landscape of a lot of sports. And I'd have to think a lot of that coincides with Danny White, who brought a lot of stability and many other things to Knoxville. But I'm guessing at this point, how do you summarize the job he's done? Because it feels like they probably wouldn't trade him for anybody in the world at this point with the job he's done in Knoxville.
Well, he has done what he's done is he knows he has good coaches. I mean, he hasn't really, other than Josh Heupel, the really successful coaches were already here. So it's not like he came in and totally revamped the entire athletic department. Well, what he did is he raised the bar. He said, this is what I expect. I expect winning, and what do you need to win? And anytime he gives a coach that open door policy, what do you need? Then you better be able to produce. And it has been kind of a snowball. You know, Coach Rick Barnes was already here. He had established program, but he's had some success the last several years. He's elevated the program, and he's been able to deal with the NIL and the transfer portal. In fact, Tennessee might even be better than they were last year with Dalton Connect. Josh Heupel stabilized the football program and has got it back on the uptick. And most SEC schools, if the football team's doing well, that lifts the water, lifts all the boats in the ocean. And so that's kind of helped. But, you know, Karen Weekly was already here with the softball team. She's been winning a lot of games. Tony Vitello was here, but the baseball team is like a locomotive steaming down the track now. I mean, it's just going full guns. But there is a positive vibe all over Big Orange Country about what is going on in the athletic department, because all the sports are doing well and all the sports are competing. And that's exactly where Danny White raised the bar to. I expect you to compete for SEC championships, and not winning the all sports trophy should be a goal every year. And so far they've been able to do it. But it's been kind of remarkable the last couple of years, just the momentum all these sports have gained. You know, Kelly Harper, a lot of schools would love to have the success that Kelly Harper had as a coach, but she didn't win championships. And so Danny White decided to bring in Kim Caldwell. So that also sends a message, I think, to the other coaches. You know, we expect you to win and win championships. So Tennessee's in a pretty good place right now. You're right.
As far as football goes, there was a spell where it was coaching changes, and it was like Tennessee couldn't quite find the momentum for the long haul. Josh Heupel comes in, obviously great year in 22, good year last year. They're looking to build on that this year. What is it about this team to you, before we get into the different players and everything? What is it about this team to you that you think could maybe get back to like it was in 2022 when they had that good season?
Well, the great thing about 22 is they had really great quarterback play. And I think anymore in the SEC, that's what it boils down to. You got to have great quarterback play to win. And Hendon Hooker was just phenomenal. And when Hendon Hooker came here, nobody really had an idea that he was going to be that good. In fact, you remember when Josh Heupel got here, when they went through spring practice, that's when he went out and got Joe Milton, because he wasn't really sure what he had with Hendon Hooker. And suddenly Joe gets hurt, Hendon comes in, doesn't give the job back, and just took off. And so Hendon Hooker was remarkable in terms of what he meant for this program, the number of big games he won, and just what a leader he was. And so Tennessee now thinks they've got another player that could be potentially one of those great quarterbacks that you have to have great success. Nico Iamaleava has all the tools. He's tall. He's a better volleyball player, maybe even as a football player. So that tells you what kind of athlete he is. He throws a catchable ball. He has been in the offense now for a year and a half, so he knows exactly what Coach Heupel wants. And I think all Tennessee fans are just chomping at the bit to see exactly how good he can be. They got a taste last year against Iowa in a bowl game, and now they get a chance to see him from the start of the season and see how far that Nico can take him this year. And Tennessee fans are expecting a lot.
Bob, I look at that receiving room. They got a lot of size, athleticism, talent. You got, I guess, the most proven guy there is Squirrel White. They bring in Mike Matthews, who was a top 30 recruit. They got Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Chris Brazel from Tulane. I guess White would be the favorite to probably lead them in targets and yardage and whatever. But what does the pecking order look like in that room? Because it feels like they got a lot of good options, but it's hard for me to know where they separate looking at it on paper.
Well, that's why you go through fall camp to figure out who's going where. Traditionally, Coach Heupel's only played really 4 wide receivers, and usually 2 on each side. So you've got to really fight hard to get in that rotation. He might expand that a little bit because he, as you mentioned, Brazel is a guy that they really like. They targeted him, went out and got him. Having Brew McCoy come back is just really big, not only from his playing ability, but from his leadership ability. He's a big, tough, strong guy. I can't imagine cornerbacks out there thinking it's going to be a good day when they have to try and tackle Brew McCoy one-on-one. But he blocks also. He'll get out there and he'll clear a path for one of the other receivers, and he does it all. And there's a reason he came back for this year, because he thinks he could really up his draft status and also help Tennessee win a lot of games. But you're right, that receiving room is deep, and there's going to be all kinds of competition to try and get on the field. And I think it's going to be really a strong point on this football team. And but when you get a good quarterback, he's a magnet. I mean, receivers, they don't want to go to a school where they're not sure who the quarterback is or how good he is or can he make plays or what's going on there. Receivers want to go to a place where they know that they've got a really good quarterback, and Tennessee's got that. And that's why Tennessee's been able to attract really good skill players, because they want to play with Nico. And Tennessee's been out recruiting other quarterbacks. So they've got them. They got them stacked up coming. And it's if you want to play quarterback, Josh Heupel has a quarterback friendly offense that you're going to throw the football, and that you got a chance to put up big numbers.
As far as the offensive line goes, I know they have some coming back. They've got a couple of transfers in there as well. What does the offensive line look like for Tennessee this year?
Well, getting Mays back at center, I think, solidified everything. And then Spraggins is back at guard. And so Dane Davis is back. They went out and got the transfer from LSU. And so they've got guys that have been around, Campbell back. And so they've got guys that have played. And that is a big bonus. When Josh Heupel came to Tennessee, he really only had 5 offensive linemen that he felt could play in the SEC.
Wow.
And so the cupboard was pretty bare. And so he's been able to build and get recruits in and be able to restock the offensive line. So they think they've got 10 or 12 guys in the league. Lampley's played a lot of football for Tennessee. He'll be back again. So they've got guys that have played a lot of football there that they now, if they get one injury, a couple of years ago, you got an injury in the offensive line and it just crippled everything. Well, now they can withstand an injury or two in the offensive line and have guys they can plug in. That's what makes Georgia and Alabama, why their runs have been so impressive. When they lose somebody, they just plug in another All-American. And that's, to have a championship football team, that's where you've got to get to. And Tennessee thinks they're getting there. Might not be there right now, but they're getting close to that.
Bob, when I look at their roster, I feel like the offense is going to take care of itself with
Sure.
the talent and the pedigree of success there. Defensively, like what they've got in the trenches between Thomas, Norman Lott, and Pierce. My question is that back 7. I'm not saying they're bad there, but I look at them comparatively compared to the rest of the team, and I think that's probably where I've got more questions than anybody else. And they brought in some transfers, Temple, MTSU, Oregon State. They get Keenan Peely back, which I think he got hurt game 1 last year. He's old. He'll help them a lot. Is that probably the biggest?
He might not like that you're calling him old. He's a veteran. How about that?
Yeah, I don't know that it makes it untrue, but we could be more tactful there. But still, that to me feels like the place where relatively I've got the most questions about what they are.
I think everybody does. I mean, I think that's exactly where everybody is seeing on this team. Now they've got depth in the defensive line. They really think they're solid up there, and they've got 6 linebackers now that they think that they can play and rotate in there. So they think the front 7 is pretty solid, but the secondary again is they've got some battles that have to be won in fall camp to see who's going to play back there. And anymore in college football, you've got to have 10 defensive backs usually because of running guys in and out and how much space they've got to cover. So Tennessee needs to find some guys to make sure that they're solid. They think they're talented back there. They think they've got some guys that could run, and they think they got some guys that have the ability. One guy, Boo Carter, is a young man that everybody's talking about. He's a freshman, but he has one of those. He kind of jumps off the page at you when you see him in practice. So he's a guy that's probably going to have to play and try and contribute early. So, but they have to figure out exactly what they've got in the secondary. But again, they feel, especially with Peely coming back, he's been such a good leader for them, and the players really respect him. And so, and his leadership ability on the field has been really good. But Arian Carter, they think, is going to be a good player. T-Lander is back, so they like him. So there's some guys that can play, and so it's just a matter of going out there and doing it on the field.
Bob, looking at the schedule, I mean, there's some good games on this schedule. There's no doubt about it. What stands out to me, though, 4 straight at home: Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi State. I think that's big to have those 4 at home. The NC State game is intriguing to me. Neutral site there in Charlotte. Then, of course, road trips. You go to Oklahoma, which should be a fun game in the first SEC game. Road trips to Arkansas, Georgia, Vandy. What stands out to you about the schedule? I mean, I think there's a lot of games to look forward to on it.
Well, I think the NC State game is the first really measuring stick that you get. I mean, you get Chattanooga, and that's kind of a tune-up and kind of figure out rotations and all those type of things in the Chattanooga. They better not look past it, but it should be a game that you should be able to work some of the kinks and some of the bugs out of your offense. But the NC State game, I think, is going to be challenging. NC State's got a decent football team, and that they've got this game circled on their calendar. And so I think that you'll learn a lot from the NC State game. And then, as you mentioned, then you jump right into it with Oklahoma and then the rest of the SEC stuff coming down the pack. But I think Tennessee is anxious to get this thing started to see how good they can be. I think that I think picking them 7th in the SEC was kind of a little bit of a wake-up call, because I believe they really feel to a man that they're going to be a contender in the SEC to make the playoffs and all those type things. And, of course, picked 15th in the country, so they're just outside that playoff window. But they think that this is a very talented football team. And, again, it's going to be how far Nico can really lead them. How far can your quarterback take you? How many great plays can he make for you? And they're expecting a lot out of Nico in this wide receiving corps. So I think it's an exciting time to be a Tennessee football fan, because this team has a chance to ring up scores again this year, put a lot of points on the board, and be a hard team to keep pace with.
Yeah, Bob, I feel like the middle of that schedule is going to define their season. I think that game against Oklahoma, and look, there's a lot of interesting ones. That one to me is just out of curiosity, is just a top 5 game for me in the league this year. Like, to see Jackson Arnold and Nico go against each other. How many points can these score? And then you got those back-to-back home games, the 12th and the 19th of Florida and Alabama. Remember what happened last time Alabama played? I mean, the middle of that schedule is going to be just a fascinating part of their season.
True, and you know that the Oklahoma game, while Coach Heupel doesn't like talking about it, it is going to be a special one for him, and I'm sure that he'll have some bulletin board material, and I think the players will, by the time that game gets here, they'll understand how important that game is to Coach Heupel, and I would expect them to be very excited to play that game. You hope they don't get too emotional, but you expect them to be very, very excited about playing that game. But it's it's the same old juggernaut for Tennessee and the SEC. You got Georgia and Alabama and Florida every year. And even though they're saying, well, Florida's not this or not that, they're still Florida. And Tennessee's been through those games in the past with Florida where the Gators weren't supposed to be very good, but you got all you wanted from them. So you've got to expect that when you play the game. It's for in the Tennessee Florida game, you got to go out and beat them. I mean, you can't worry about whether or not this or not that. You better go out and take care of business and beat them. And I think that Tennessee that'll have their attention. And of course, it doesn't take much for Tennessee to get up to play Alabama. We all know that. So, but the middle of the schedule is, we'll know a lot by the end of October how good this Tennessee team is.
Before we let you go, Bob, last question here, and I'm just curious. Being the voice of a team, it's 26 years as the voice of the Vols. You've been around the Tennessee program and the university for a long time, and fans hear the voice of their team, and they listen to them every Saturday and all the programming during the week. What does it mean to you to be the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers? What does that mean to Bob Kesling?
Well, it's special. I came here as a walk-on fullback back in 1972. Really didn't know hardly anybody in the state of Tennessee, and then just kind of pinch yourself and later and think that you're representing the entire state is. I mean, it's almost overwhelming a little bit, and it's something you don't take for granted. And every time you step in that booth, you got a responsibility. And every time they run through that tee, it still gets everything stirred up and you get tingles. And I mean, it's so special. So I've enjoyed it. It's when your alma mater calls and asks you to do something as important as be the lead announcer on their radio network. It's special. And this has been special for me. It's been a great run and a great ride. And I enjoy the guys I work with, Tim Priest, who we were together for a long time now, Pat Ryan, and all the other guys on the broadcast, and where we get to go and where we get suddenly you kind of look, Pat and I kind of look at each other before the game, and you're sitting there in front of 100,000 people. You're just going, how special is this? I mean, how great this is. So I don't take it for granted, and every game is important. Every game's special, and I can't wait for the end of August to get here so we can get this thing teed up and get it going again.
He is Bob Kesling, the voice of the Tennessee Volunteers over the Vol Network. Bob, really appreciate you taking some time with us, talking some Tennessee football, and we'll certainly have to do it again, but appreciate your time today.
Thank you, guys. Anytime. Have a good week. Thank you.
That was Bob Kesling, voice of the Tennessee Volunteers, and Chris, it was so good to talk to. He's been around that program for a long time. Yeah. He's seen a lot of Tennessee football, and you can tell just the passion he has for the Volunteers, which is what you want in the radio voice.
Yeah, and such a class act as a person. The people up there speak so well of Bob, and he's just he walked into a tough job, filling John Ward's shoes. I mean, a legend. But Bob knows the game, works hard, and boy, he's had a lot of good stuff to call of late.
He sure has, and will this year as well. As we were talking about quarterbacks, Nico Iamaleava will probably be one we're talking about towards the end of the season as well. So appreciate Bob Kesling for taking a few minutes and talking some Tennessee football with us this week here on the SEC Football Hour. We'll roll into some Who Said This. Always enjoy this segment of the show. I'll go first this week. I'll give you my quote and let you guess who said this. So who said this, Chris? I just want everybody to know I'm not conservative. I want to throw the ball all the time.
Um, that could be Mike Leach. Could be Hal Mummy. I'm gonna go Mike Leach.
That is incorrect.
Oh, okay.
Do you want a second guess here? I feel like this is not who you would think it is. I'll give you another guess.
Give me the quote one more time.
I just want everybody to know I'm not conservative. I want to throw the ball all the time.
That sounds defensive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Could that be a Jimbo Fisher?
It is not Jimbo
Okay.
Fisher. It was actually Nick Saban.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I read it. I thought that
Yeah.
doesn't sound like something Saban says at first, but I can hear him saying that. But yeah, there was no scenario with that, but I thought that was an interesting. That was not one I thought Nick Saban would say.
So we don't know if he said that in 2002 or 2022.
It was while he was at Alabama. So
Okay. That narrows it
from
down a little bit, but yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. I knew I'd get you with that one. I didn't
Yeah,
think
you
you would
did.
say Nick Saban.
That's good. Yes, that's a good one. All right. I like this one. Every day I pull into that parking spot that says head football coach. I get out of my car and I pinch myself sometimes just to make sure it's real, sort of like, is this really happening?
Hmm. I feel like that's a coach that um maybe coaching at his school or um I'm gonna go Ed Orgeron.
You got the first part of your guess was right. Coaching at his school. It's Kirby Smart though.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. He popped in my mind because I know
Yeah.
he's a Georgia guy, but I just felt like that was something Coach O would have said. Just in his, he was
Yeah.
so happy to be at LSU. But yeah, that okay. Kirby, I could see Kirby saying that. So we had
Yep.
Saban and Kirby as our quotes today. I think that's the first time we've had that. So always fun with who said this. We'll roll in now to some likely or unlikely. Chris, I'll let you go first. What's the scenario you've got for me?
All right. On the topic of coaches, how many coaching changes did we have last year?
Ooh,
You had at Alabama, um, Mississippi
Mississippi
State,
State.
Texas A&M. I guess that was it. All right.
Yeah.
Likely or unlikely, there will be more than two new SEC head coaches next year.
Ooh, more than two.
More than two.
More than two. Oh, that's all right. So the possibilities would be Florida, Arkansas. I'm going to lump Vanderbilt in there as well because they got
Those
to
are the
win
first
SEC
three that I
games.
thought. Yep.
Past that, I don't see any. Unless a coach was to leave to go somewhere else. That's just so tough because I feel like when you go into a year knowing that a coach is on a hot seat, they don't always. It doesn't. I mean, they play better, they win games. I'm going to say unlikely. I think there could be two, but I'm going to go unlikely with more than two.
I think I would go likely, and I'm going to tell you why. Let's go back to a year ago. Let's pretend we don't know anything that happened. Who would we say might get canned at the end of the season? I've got some names in mind. I just want to see if we're on the same page here.
Go back to last season.
Yeah, if we were to do this time last year, we don't know what happens in 2023. What's our list look like?
Last year before the season, I would have said Sam Pittman,
Okay.
Eli Drinkwitz,
Yeah.
possibly. Um, Jimbo, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, and see, I thought they were going to give Zach Arnett another year,
Yeah.
and they didn't. So I really wouldn't have put that into. I think that would have been all.
Well, was Pittman on the hot seat this time a year ago? I can't remember. I
Well,
feel like he had a lot of
technically,
good, but
no.
I feel like they were looking at it going, "Hey, we got Rocket Sanders, we got KJ Jefferson, we got some dudes, we're ready to roll." And he was still coming off the goodwill of the first few years. I think
Yeah,
this time a year ago, we would have sized the hot seat as um oh goodness, Jimbo Fisher.
yeah.
Other than that, I
Scorching.
don't know that. I
Yeah,
mean, and Drinkwitz would have been another one. I think Drinkwitz, if he'd gone 6 and 7 again, that might have worn out its welcome there. And there's my point. Okay, I think we could have said Nick Saban. I mean, wasn't entirely unforeseeable, but I would have bet
yeah,
against it. Um, uh, it's very unusual for a team to make a change after 1 year.
yeah,
So I would have thought Zach Arnett would have got another year. And even with Jimbo Fisher, it was like, are they going to pay $80 million to buy him out? That was a question.
yeah.
So I guess my point would be that was a lot of things that you probably wouldn't have seen coming.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
think this league is such a high pressure league. I'd go over. I think we can name some likely scenarios, but you never know what happens if Hugh Freeze goes 5-7 at Auburn. Auburn's
yeah,
a place that'll have a quick trigger on a guy. What happens if a coach just says, "Hey, I'm ready for the NFL. I want to give this a shot. I've done all I could done in college," or just something just out of the box. I think you could always. It feels to me like the answer on this year in to year out would be over too. But even the coaches that are on the hot seat, I think most of them are defensible at this point. I
yeah,
think I put my faith in an over pick on just the realm of the unknown that you can't see
yeah.
coming into the season.
Do you see any? Let's say any of these jobs come open in the SEC. Do you
Okay.
see any current SEC coaches moving to another SEC school?
So we're talking Florida, we're talking Arkansas, we're talking Vandy.
Yeah,
I don't think Vandy's at all attractive right now. That's one that easily is eliminated unless you get an up and coming coordinator somewhere. So, but that eliminates a head coach. I think I don't know. Arkansas could be attractive, but it feels like the NIL money is on basketball right now, and
right.
you'd have to get the right guy. And if you're going to excite Arkansas fans, I don't know. I don't know. There's so many schools in this league that are brands. I think the one that would intrigue a lot of people would be Florida.
I think so
Like
too. Yep.
I think if you're Kalen DeBoer, you don't leave Alabama. I think if you're Kirby Smart, you don't leave Georgia. I think if you're Brian Kelly, you probably don't leave LSU. But other than that, hey, that's a super attractive job, I think.
I think so too. And that's the one that I feel like if any SEC coach was to pack up and move, it would be to go to Gainesville,
Yeah.
to Florida. So yeah, I like that scenario you threw out there, Chris. All right, here's one from me. The Tennessee Volunteers play. I'm not going to say win the SEC. Play in the SEC championship game.
Who? I'm going to go unlikely
Okay.
because I think Georgia's in there despite a brutal schedule. And I think Texas's schedule really lends itself to getting there.
Yeah.
Tennessee, if it's going to do it, I think it's going to have to lose one game. It's got to go to Oklahoma. It's got to go to Georgia, and it's got Alabama at home. Not to mention Florida has been one to trip Tennessee up. I don't think it's an off the board possibility, but I just think it's hard for me to come off Georgia or Texas in that spot.
Yeah. And completely understandable. Yeah, I'm not sold on it either, but yeah, I would go unlikely there as well. But they're one of those borderline teams that they could do something crazy and get there,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if that were the case. So,
You've
uh,
also got Missouri there with
right,
a lot of
yeah,
talent probably the easiest two schedules in the league are Missouri and Tennessee, and I think Missouri is easier.
yeah, for sure. All right, so what's another scenario in some likely or unlikely, Chris?
Okay, speaking of Georgia and Texas, will those teams both be unbeaten when they play each other week 8 in Austin?
Mm, let's see here. So Georgia will have had Clemson, Tennessee Tech, road trips to Kentucky and Alabama, Auburn, and Mississippi State. I think Georgia will be, unless Alabama can sneak up on them in Tuscaloosa. Texas will have had Colorado State, at Michigan, UTSA, ULM, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma. What's interesting to me about Texas' schedule is they have Oklahoma and Georgia back to back.
Yeah.
That's tough. I'm gonna say likely. I'm gonna go just to make this game more exciting, and I'm gonna go yes, likely. Both teams unbeaten going into this game.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is.
Because I feel like if I go against you, I've sort of contradicted everything I just said when you asked me your first question. But I mean, it feels like one of those, like if you had a Ken Pomeroy for basketball, I don't know how much you look at that, but it'll be like you look down a team and it's like, all right, they're projected to win all 18 SEC games. But then you look up at the end up and he's got them going 15-3. Because some of those times that team's a favorite, it's a 55% favorite or 52% favorite or whatever. I feel like you look at some of the teams on this schedule for both teams. Okay, if they're going to get here, Texas will have to win at Michigan. It will have to have beaten Oklahoma on a neutral field. I think the other games won't be much of a problem. In Georgia, I think you mentioned all these, but Clemson neutral field at Alabama, at Kentucky. I don't think it's a pushover. I think they win
Right.
it probably convincingly, but that's a team that's matched up with them well. Auburn, you just never know at Alabama. That's a lot of really tough teams that both teams have got to beat to get here.
It really is, and that's such a tough question. Because yeah, I mean, and I yeah, it's tough. I'm gonna go likely just to stay on the safe side, but yeah, it's not gonna surprise me at all if those both of those teams lose a game this year in the regular season, maybe two. I mean, that's just the way things are now. We've talked about it on other videos. Like it's gonna be so much harder for teams to go undefeated than it used to be.
Chase, what are the TV ratings for that? If both those teams get to that point undefeated, I mean, that's going to be, I would think, one of the most watched regular season football games in our lifetime. If that scenario plays out.
ABC and ESPN will absolutely love if both of these
Yes.
teams are undefeated because I'm sure it will be the primetime ABC game for the SEC that week, and so yes, they would absolutely love if both teams were undefeated because yes, there will be a lot of eyeballs on that game. Yeah, and I'm sure it would be, and it probably will be anyway, whether both
Yeah.
teams have a loss or one team has a loss. Like this is a championship type game, in the middle of the season in October.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be watching it regardless. But yeah, if both teams are unbeaten, yeah, the number will skyrocket. All right, here is final likely or unlikely, Chris. Uh, we talked about quarterbacks earlier. I put Brady Cook as my number 5. Brady Cook leads the SEC in passing yards. A year ago,
Unlikely.
he had
Sorry.
3,313 last year.
Yeah. Well, we did in another show, we did 3 bowl predictions for Georgia, and I picked Carson Beck to lead the country in passing. So I'll ride with that. But
Okay.
that's an interesting question. I think the question is, can Brady Cook follow up with another
Yeah.
season. Like, is what he was last year what he is, or is there a little bit of regression? Because Brady Cook, I don't know if you remember this time a year ago, when he went into camp, I think there was still some question of whether he was the guy, or maybe better stated, if he was the guy, were they in a little bit of trouble? Of course, Brady
Yeah.
Cook rose up and had one of the best seasons of any SEC quarterback a year ago. But I think that's a tough ask with some of the guys in this league.
What about top 3?
Okay. I'm obviously going to take back. I think Quinn Ewers won't be in there just because they're going to split time with Arch Manning. They're going to blow some
Yeah.
teams out. So I would take him out. Jackson Dart is going to be interesting. I don't know what Ole Miss does like in a blowout. I think Ole Miss is going to have several blowouts. At some point you got to start giving Walker Howard some time. But goodness, Missouri's going to have some blowouts too, Chase. I mean, you look at the first 4 games, they're probably going to be 20-plus point favorites.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then maybe you get him out of there because you got a lot to play for. I think top 3 still feels aggressive. I think that you might get either Tennessee or Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We'll get a guy in there with the way they throw the ball, and especially Oklahoma, with Oklahoma having some close games. I just feel like there's some things that are stacked against it, but it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah. That's fair. Like, I think he could be top 5 when it comes to passing yards for sure. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can follow up with that year that he had last year. That'll be fun to follow, and we'll have you covered with all things SEC football here. That will do it for this episode number 9 of the SEC Football Hour. Appreciate you for joining us. Like this video, share it with your friends. We do this every week in conjunction with all of the other videos that we do. We have season previews for every team out. We have scheduled previews for every team out. We're putting out 3 bold predictions for every SEC team. We're working on that right now. And so you can just subscribe to our channel there at Southeastern 16 and see everything we have going on right now. Also, we got you covered in basketball and baseball as well. So again, subscribe to the Southeastern 16 channel. If you want to sponsor our content, we would love to have you sponsor our content here. And you can do that by emailing caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. That will get you in touch with her. We can begin those conversations on you sponsoring our content here at Southeastern 16. For Chris Lee, I'm Chase Robinson. We'll talk to you next week with more of the SEC Football Hour here on Southeastern 16.